Welcome back to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to be talking about Dori, a build guide looking at her as a character. We've already made our way through most of the Sumeru characters actually at this point in the character archive, and once again, as soon as the Natlan characters come up and I can actually use them and then get through a better idea of looking at them as characters, I'll go ahead and make a build guide as soon as they come out, and so that you guys can have a little bit of a better feel, especially looking forward to Kachina as well as Mualani. Now, looking at Dori though, first and foremost, let's go ahead and jump right into what she's going to be doing on a team. Now, the biggest idea when looking at Dori as a character, she's mainly just going to be a healer. She has some application that you can make work, but at the end of the day, she's going to be a healer with a focus on a lot of HP and a lot of energy recharge. So the things that you're going to see in this build really only focus on those two major things. Now, let's go ahead and look at her talents. When looking at leveling priority, her normal attack as well as her skill are just personal damage, and they're all based off of attack anyways. The only thing that's based off of HP that you're going to be consistently going into is going to be her burst with her HP healing. So that idea kind of gets itself already thrown out the window in my personal opinion. The burst is the major way that you're going to want to go forward to looking into leveling into. Now, the skill and the normal attack, once again, you can see they're all based on attack percents. Honestly, it's not worth it to go into attack at all to even make these do a little bit better. If you really want to, you can make these do a little bit better, but I really feel like this is more for application, this skill specifically, rather than anything else. Don't touch the normal attacks really at all. But let's go ahead and look at the skill description. It states that it directs a spirit warding lamp to fire off a troubleshooter shot at opponents, dealing electro damage. After the troubleshooter shot hits, it will create 2 after sales service rounds that will automatically track nearby opponents and deal electro damage. Once again, you're seeing the initial hit of electro and then 2 after sales service rounds that are then changing over into doing more electro damage as well. Now, looking at the skill attributes, once again, you see the major damage hit is going to be from the original shot and then the 2 shots afterwards. This does have a cooldown of 9 seconds, but that does actually help a little bit more when we get into some of the passive talents that she has. Now, looking a little bit further into her burst, let's go ahead and look at the skill description for this. Basically, you're going to be summoning for Ginny, who's then going to be connected to a specific character that is on the field. The connected character will continuously restore HP based on Dori's max HP, continuously regenerate energy, and they will be affected by Electro. When the connector between the character and Ginny touches opponents, it will deal 1 instance of Electro to them every 0.4 seconds. So if anything tries to come in between you and Ginny, it will basically take Electro application as well. So as we're seeing here, a lot of Electro application that you can make work if you're kind of running around a lot with your characters, especially between the Ginny that Dori's creating. A lot of healing as well and a lot of energy regeneration for the character. Now, I do feel like there is going to be a little bit more of an instance with this specific healing. I do feel like when you're looking forward to this, the kind of teams that you're going to be focusing on are mainly going to be kind of those quicken teams, specifically focusing on just her being the major healer. That means you don't have Baiju, don't have Yao Yao. You're not really looking for a lot of characters that have goated you're looking for characters that have really, really good healing. But, someone like Kuki or whatever usually focuses more into EM for Hyper Bloom. So even if you have Kuki, having Dori could help you, just have an extra healer on the account, as well as be really good for those aggravate teams or whatever, or looking at other, spread teams or something like that. Basically just focusing on those quick and catalyzed teams like I was talking about. Now looking at the passive talents, the first passive talent states that after a character connected to Ginny triggers an electro charge, superconduct, overload, basically any type of electro related reaction, the cooldown of the skill is decreased by 1 second. And this effect can be triggered once every 3 seconds. Remember, there are 3 different shots that come out of basically using the skill, so this does trigger 3 times. So once again, this does hit initially, but once again, the effect, even though you have 3 separate shots basically, you have to wait 3 seconds for this to trigger again. Now, that does mean that basically with the cooldown of 9 seconds, you can only really get this down to about 7-second, cooldown, which is still very nice. It's not necessarily terrible, especially even if you, once again, you have to get basically another use out of the skill to do something. But the major idea here is basically just decreasing that skill cooldown so you can use it more consistently, mainly focusing on getting a lot more application as well as more particles for your team as well as for Dori. Now, the second passive talent, when we look at it, basically the 3 different types of shots that come from the skill, when those hit opponents, Dori will restore 5 elemental energy for every 100% energy recharge that she possesses. Looking at her skill, only 1 instance of energy restoration can be triggered and a maximum of 15 energy can be restored this way. So even though you're hitting once again multiple times in there, you can only get that from basically one instance of energy restoration from the skill. So the idea here is that when you're doing this, it's basically counting up to, you're going to need about 300% energy recharge to get the maximum of 15 energy to give to yourself back to Dori. Now, looking at the basically the burst cost, the energy cost from her burst, that's still a very big chunk of time, especially if you can get a lot of particles, especially with double electro characters, or double electro on the team. It's going to help that resonance help a little bit more while creating more particles so that your team is getting more energy back, allowing for constant rotations. So although this does have a high energy cost, it is getting a little bit knocked down based on the amount of energy recharge you have, which is another reason why, as we're going to go into weapons, you're going to want to focus on an energy recharge weapon. That is a major thing when looking at this, is to make sure that you're getting the maximum 15 elemental energy out of that specific talent. And, really, because that's just going to help you get your burst back on rotation. And if she's the only healer on the team, that is going to be very helpful and very specific for you, as kind of looking forward to that. Now, looking at Favonius Greatsword, this is going to be our first weapon. The idea here, even though it has a little bit of a lower base attack than something like Sacrificial Greatsword, the reason why this weapon is so much better is because it has over double the amount of energy recharge as a main stat that you can get. Also, in the ability, it gives you the chance to create more elemental particles on crit hits. So obviously here, going full blown into a lot of energy restoration for the character that's either on field or for Dori, very, very helpful. Also, Sacrificial Greatsword, I said, was a second to this. Although it does have half the amount of energy recharge, it makes up a little bit for it by using its skill a little bit more often. Basically, the ability allows you that as soon as your skill hits an opponent, it has a chance, based on its refinement, to then immediately be able to use your skill again, get rid of the cooldown basically, and allow you to basically use it twice back to back, allowing for more electro application from Dori, but as well it allows for more elemental energy created by the character, either for, once again, more characters or for herself. So she kind of helps a little bit more with this weapon. It does help a little bit, but it's still, once again, not as going to be as good as Favonius Greatsword. Now, there are other weapons that go into energy recharge that you could look at, like the Ultimate Sword. This does have an ER main stat weapon, but the ability doesn't really help at all, which is why it's a little bit lower in my personal opinion when looking at a lot of these types of weapons for Dori. Another weapon you could use is the craftable claymore from Inazuma, and the idea here is that it does have an energy recharge main stat as well at 45.9%, which is still going to be very, very good when looking at that. So it is very nice to see for that specific weapon. And the ability also increases some elemental skill damage while also giving some energy back based on that if you lose some elemental energy. So the idea here is basically, once again, going for full-blown energy. That craftable from Inazuma is going to be pretty good as well if you want to use that, if you can. This is a little bit more free-to-play base, whereas these other weapons you kind of have to get through the wishing system. If you do have this event weapon as well, this is from an event if you want to go ahead and grab that. Now, if you are looking for a little bit more of a kind of mix between helping out maybe some more elemental mastery buffs from kind of looking at quicken teams and whatnot, the kind of idea with that, the idea when looking for another weapon is a Forced Regalia, which is a claymore that you could also get. It is an energy recharge main set, although it doesn't have as much as something like the other weapon I already talked about in looking at the craftable weapon from Inazuma. It doesn't have as much as Favonius Greatsword either. It's about on par with what you're going to get from Sacrificial Greatsword. At level 90, it gives 30.6% energy recharge, and when looking at the ability, if you trigger Burning, Quicken, Aggravate, Spread, Bloom, Hyper Bloom, or Burgeon, basically any Dendro type of reaction, a Leaf of Consciousness will be created around the character for a maximum of 10 seconds, and then when picked up, the leaf will grant the character 60 elemental mastery for 12 seconds, and basically that only happens every 20 seconds. But the idea here is that it helps a little bit more often with maybe those on-fielders. If Dori's going right before the DPS, let's say Alhaitham even, increasing his elemental mastery is going to be extremely good. It once again keeps that leaf on field for a while, so even if she's first in the rotation, as long as any other character doesn't pick it up, that's going to be kind of the idea here. As soon as you get towards your DPS that's more focused on EM, you can go ahead and pick up that leaf to then get more energy for the character that's going to be using it, as well as that can make better use of it than someone like Dori. So that weapon could be useful as well, but that's kind of the only idea here. If you really want to, there are some HP percent main stat weapons you can go for. The portable power saw that'll help more with healing. And, there are some other weapons like the bell that also helps with HP percent. But honestly, when looking at those weapons, you don't really get as much kind of payback for what you put in because, once again, you're not getting a lot of that energy recharge. She does have an 80 elemental cost burst, which means that you need to have at least probably over around 180 to over 200% energy recharge, especially with how little often she kind of hits as a character. It's kind of a little bit more forced to have a high energy recharge on her. Also, those passive talents are helping more with energy for her as well. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some artifacts. Now, I'm going to go kind of through this pretty quickly because the only real set that I would really recommend is going to be the 4-piece Noblesse. The reason why is because it's weird because a lot of other characters actually, even if they could make use of this set, they don't. And you've seen that kind of very easily because most of the times when you're going to be using Noblesse, it's most likely going on top of Bennett. And the reason why you can't really use this set on multiple people is the 4-piece increases attack when you use your burst, which sounds great for a lot of characters, but this effect cannot stack, and honestly, Bennett uses this to the maximum, so putting this on Bennett's going to be best. But most of the time when dealing with Dori, you're not going to be putting Bennett on the same team as her. So when using this, actually, this set can actually be extremely good for her and does really, really well. You don't really care for the 2-piece at all, but the 4-piece is really where it comes into play. Increasing attack for other characters, once again, Al-Haytham, even though he likes that Elemental Mastery, he also does like the extra buff to attack. He's already going a lot into Elemental Mastery, and he's getting a lot of Elemental Mastery from other sources, other characters probably, so to give him a buff to attack is going to be very, very nice for him as a character. Now, the idea here, though, once again, is to make sure that with this set, this is kind of just the best set, really, for her, in my personal opinion. And honestly, as you can see, most of the people that built her already are running this anyways. Now, if you don't have this and you're getting ready to kind of grind a better set for Dori, you can use, in the meantime, a 2-piece HP percent set like Tenacity, or any other set that has a 2-piece HP percent set. Also, you can go for a 2-piece of Emblem of Severed Fate because of the energy recharge 2-piece. I would say that if you are running any type of 2-piece, always run Emblem of Severed Fate 2-piece. Don't really go for the 4-piece because it's increasing burst damage and you just don't need that for this character. Now, there also, I've seen, is a set where people use Ocean Hued Clam, which does a certain amount of damage based on the amount of healing that you do back out at the character. Honestly, she doesn't really get to use it to its fullest, and honestly, I would rather just use this on another character that's going to be a little bit better for that specific set. Once again, you're getting the most out of looking for Dori when you're kind of looking for this 4-piece Noblesse Oblige set. Now let's go ahead and talk about artifacts. Now, while looking at the different sets that you have in kind of the idea for looking at these pieces, the idea though isn't to focus on HP percent sets at all. It's actually to focus on an energy recharge sands. Once again, even though if you have an energy recharge main stat weapon, and you go for an energy recharge sands, that puts you at about 210, 220% energy recharge. Now, once again, while that's nice, you're trying to get as close as you're just trying to stack as much as you can to go even higher. So even with some extra bonuses and whatnot, that can be useful. But once you get over to the goblet, you want to go into an HP percent goblet because that's going to help more with healing. And then the circlet, you're going to want to go into either crit rate or healing bonus. Now, preferably, I would rather go into healing bonus just to make sure that she does better heals. Once again, the crit rate is really mainly just if you have Favonius Greatsword, and even if you do have it, I really don't feel like it's really necessary because a lot of the times, even with your skill, you're creating a lot of particles. You should have double electro usually in the team, and that'll help more with particle generation, which is just going to help more with your characters getting their burst back. So I really don't feel like it's too necessary to go into a crit rate circlet to trigger that skill a lot of the time, or basically that ability that comes from Favonius Greatsword. So I really feel like healing bonus gets the most out of your Dori for her healing for your characters. Now, when looking at substats, going for HP percent, crit rate, and energy recharge. Now, I would rather say energy recharge, HP percent, and then crit are going to be the ideas of the specific things you're going to look for. Crit rate is at the very bottom because, once again, you're only really using that to get some extra energy from one part of her kit. You don't really care about her critting much more besides that. Energy recharge is at the top because you're trying to max it out, and then HP percent is behind that. Even double HP is better than going into some crit rate for her as a character. Now let's go ahead and look at Constellations. Looking at the first constellation, it states that the number of after-sales service rounds created by troubleshooter shots, her skill, is increased by 1. This is once again just going to help a little bit with more personal application. There's really not a real point once again going into personal damage because it's all based on attack. The second Constellation special franchise states that when you are in combat and Ginny heals the character it is connected to, it will fire a Ginny tube from that character's position that deals 50% of Dori's attack as damage. Now the idea here, even though you're looking at, well, maybe I should go a little bit more into attack to get this kind of damage increase instance. Once again, just allow this as another electro hit kind of idea that can do more just personal application rather than personal damage, because it's really worth it to just once again go full blown into her healing and you're going to get much more out of it out of that. Now looking at the third constellation, increases the burst by 3, and the fifth constellation increases the level of the skill by 3. The C4 states that the character connected to Ginny will obtain the following buffs based on their current HP and the current energy. If their current HP is lower than 50% of their max HP, they gain 50% incoming healing bonus, basically allowing them to get over that 50% threshold, making sure that they're staying alive. When their energy is less than 50% at current, then they gain 30% energy recharge, allowing them to basically, the particles that are coming in are then going to do more for them, allowing them to actually get more energy out of the particles that are coming in to them as a character. So this C4 is actually extremely good because if your character's low, as soon as you use your burst, it's allowing basically them to get above that 50% threshold for healing. And then as soon as they get past that 50% threshold for healing and making sure that they're staying alive, then even if you started and they were over the 50%, it's helping them get a lot more energy back for the next rotation. I know a lot of characters, especially DPSs, focus so much into crit, attack, sometimes even elemental mastery, like I was talking about with Alhaitham, that they lose out a lot on a lot of extra energy recharge, and so they sometimes, if on a bad rotation, don't sometimes get their burst back. So if that kind of ever comes up, Dori's actually helping that a lot here for those specific characters. Looking at the C6, it states that Dori gains the following effects for 3 seconds after using her skill. She'll get an Electro Infusion, and when normal attacks hit opponents, all nearby party members will heal HP equivalent to 4% of Dori's max HP, and this type of healing can occur once every 0.1 seconds. You're basically going to be able to get this healing every single time you swing, because Claymore users are pretty slow at hitting, so the healing should be able to trigger every single time you hit. Still, in my personal opinion, with the 3 seconds of healing, and it's like, well, okay, well, what about, personal damage again? Let's go. Once again, you can do this. You can go straight into attack and go full blown into it and just try it out as a meme build. But still, even with this C6, I would state that this is more for kind of allowing your entire party to get healed. So if you're using even Farina in the team and you have like a Hybrid Bloom team kind of going on, technically Dori can allow the entire team to be healed a little bit more, or maybe your entire team's just taking a bunch of hits, not even taking into effect if Farina is on the team. You could still actually take a lot of hits from your entire party, and considering she's the only healer, this allows her, as soon as she uses her skill, to kind of regain some personal energy for her from those hits that she does, but also allows her to heal the entire party while she does those Electro Infusion normal attacks for 3 seconds. As you can do that, you're probably getting another 12 to, maybe 16% of Dori's max HP to all characters, which is going to be nice to make sure that they are, once again, helping this C4 passive a little bit more often, making sure they're above that 50%, so you can go right into getting a lot more energy for those characters. Once again, I think that overall as a character, we can even see a lot here. Even though there are some extra things that help, quote-unquote, with personal damage, I still think she heavily focuses into actually helping other characters make sure their HP and energy is extremely high for constant and good rotations, making everybody feel a little bit more comfortable in their teams. Speaking of teams, looking at Dori, I think I've already kind of stated this kind of beforehand, but when looking at a team with Dori, I was talking about an Alhaitham team, kind of a quicken team that you would want to do, something like throwing Dori in the team, and then, Kale or something like that, two Dendro characters, 2 Electro characters. This is a pretty solid team that I think could work. Even someone aside from, Alhaitham, who builds very similar to him, is going to be a character like Tighnari. When looking at this team, Tighnari also fills a slot similarly to what Alhaitham's going to do. That could also help with basically either one you put here. The idea here is that Dori's going to be your healer, as well as a little bit more of that Electro application. Fischl is going to be here for, once again, Electro application, whereas also personal damage she could also do. Once they're quickened, she's going to be starting to do aggravate hits, but even still, her A4 passive, that's a little bit of a different story, and that's a different character. But once again, mainly going for the Electro application on her. And Kale is really here just because you don't have Yao Yao or Baiju, and that's why you're building Dori. In my personal opinion, if you have Yao Yao or you have Baiju, there's really no need to build Dori, because these are really the only teams I would personally put on Dori as a character. Even with the Hyper Bloom teams that people try to make, she only gets that C6 infusion for 3 seconds, so you can't really get much out of those Hyper Blooms. You can't get a lot of time in those Hyper Blooms a lot, even still. So looking at that though, Kale is there to make sure that you're getting a lot of the extra elemental mastery from the 2 elemental resonances from having 2 Dendro characters on the team. So that's the idea here, and also keep in mind once again, the high voltage elemental resonance from Electro is also helping you mainly get a lot of extra 100% chance to generate an Electro elemental particle every 5 seconds, helping a little bit more for constant energy for the characters on the field. So once again, I feel like the idea here is going fully blown into a kind of aggravate or a spread team. You could even do an Electro character on field, someone like Sino if you have them. She could just be the healer for that team. That could also work as well. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's going to be the best if you really want to. I mean, I'll just throw in even someone like Lisa you could throw in, who's technically can do that as well on a gilded set. Someone like Ketching can also work with that specifically. If you have 2 other Dendro characters, you have Nahida and Kale or something like that to kind of run the team in, double Electro once again and double Dendro. Some of the other teams, even with, I guess you could really focus on, if you don't have a lot of Electro application characters, like a lot of what people use are like Yai Miko and Fischl for like overload teams, you could kind of go forward and look at that. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's going to be too crazy, considering, you know, someone like Arlecchino, who really likes that, doesn't really like, or can't really get healed by other characters when she's in combat. But if you have someone like Raiden, who kind of can go into, you know, that idea, you can easily do something like this as a team. Now, Dori is really there for the double Electro idea, and also to make sure that there's, once again, more energy giving to Raiden. So if Raiden's, you know, energy recharge is at 50% of, you know, her bar, this is actually giving her 30% more energy recharge, which we know more energy recharge for Raiden means more damage. So possibly could be an extremely good buff as soon as after you use your burst, could allow her to get her burst back even quicker, considering she's already a battery to herself and her other characters. Having someone else help her even a little bit more is just kind of crazy and insane to think about. But Chevers is there to give a huge buff to attack from her passive, and Bennett's there obviously for the buff that he gets in his passive, and everything with the overload idea as these characters. So Dori could even help in a sense of that as a character that kind of can focus into these teams as well. So if you kind of want to go ahead and do that as well, that can also work. Well, that's everything I've got talking about looking at Dori, kind of her build guide, her tips. If you guys have any other teams that you kind of run with Dori, please go ahead and let me know down in the comments. I'd be really excited to see how Dori kind of works with other people, considering I really have only seen her built one way, and very rarely have I seen her try to go outside of that. So if you guys do have anything new, or let me know even just the normal way of how you build Dori, that'd be great. Once again, that's everything I've got talking about Dori, so if you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.